The crystal chandelier above our dining table had witnessed many strange conversations over the years, but nothing quite like this. I sat frozen, my fork halfway to my mouth, as Cathara of the Valthiran sovereignty lowered herself into what I could only describe as a reverent bow before my 120-year-old grandfather, Admiral Victor Reeves. Her melodious voice carried the weight of ceremony. I formally request the honor of your hand in marriage. My grandfather, Admiral Victor Reeves, the man who'd charted 17 star systems and survived the Proxima Wars, barely raised an eyebrow. He calmly set down his wine glass and studied our alien guest with the same intensity he'd once used to navigate asteroid fields. I'm Elena Reeves, by the way, Victor's granddaughter, and apparently the only person in the room losing their mind. At 28, I'd thought I'd seen everything working as a xenocultural liaison for the Terran embassy. I was wrong. Cathara remained in her bow, her iridescent skin catching the light like captured starfire. The Valtarians were breathtakingly elegant. Tall, willowy beings with large, luminous eyes and graceful limbs that moved like dancers. Their skin shifted through subtle hues based on emotion, and right now, Cathara's was a deep purple that, I'd learned, indicated utmost sincerity. Cathara, my grandfather said finally, his voice still carrying the authority that had commanded fleets. I'm honored by your proposal, but I think my granddaughter might need some context before she chokes on her dinner. I managed to swallow and found my voice. Context would be helpful, yes. Cathara gracefully raised herself and turned those enormous silver eyes toward me. Forgive me, Elena. Among my people, the proposal itself is sacred and must be spoken before explanations can be offered. To do otherwise would dishonor both families. Both families, I squeaked. The Valtarian marriage tradition, my grandfather explained, apparently having done his homework, centers on the worship of wisdom and time. They believe that those who have lived longest carry the greatest spiritual power. Cathara's skin shifted to a warm gold. Your grandfather is what we call Thelnaris, a time-touched one. He has lived through more than a century of experiences, accumulated wisdom beyond measure, and his accomplishments echo across the stars. To be chosen by such a being, to merge my young life with his ancient strength. She paused, her voice becoming almost reverent. There is no greater honor in our society. I stared at them both. So this isn't romantic? Romance is for the young and foolish, Cathara said with a gentle smile. This is about spiritual elevation, political alliance, and the sacred duty to preserve wisdom. Though, she glanced at my grandfather with something that might have been fondness, I find your grandfather far more fascinating than I expected. Victor chuckled, a sound I hadn't heard much since my grandmother passed 5 years ago. Cathara has been quite the correspondent. Her letters about Valthiran philosophy have been illuminating. Letters? I looked between them. How long has this been going on? 3 months, my grandfather said. Ever since the cultural exchange program began. Cathara reached out initially for historical perspectives on the Proxima Wars. Our conversations evolved. Cathara's skin rippled with soft blues and greens, what I recognized as contentment mixed with anticipation. Your grandfather possesses a mind I find stimulating. His insights into human nature, his stories of exploration and discovery, his perspective on mortality and purpose. She trailed off, her coloring deepening. I have learned more from our exchanges than from years of traditional study. And you decided to marry him? I was still struggling with the concept. I decided to honor him in the highest way my culture recognizes. Marriage to a Thelnaris elevates not just myself, but my entire lineage. It's political, yes. Such unions strengthen bonds between our species. But it's also deeply spiritual. My grandfather reached across the table and, to my amazement, took Cathara's elegantly long-fingered hand in his weathered one. Elena, I've spent 60 years exploring the unknown. This may be my most fascinating journey yet. As I watched my grandfather's eyes twinkle with genuine curiosity and saw the way Cathara's skin shimmered with warm appreciation at his touch, I realized that perhaps I was witnessing something unprecedented, the beginning of an interspecies connection that might just redefine what it meant to love across the stars. My communication device buzzed urgently. The media had gotten wind of the engagement. The galaxy was about to lose its collective mind. The next morning, I woke to find our home surrounded by reporters from 17 different species. Tentacled squillins held hover cameras, while crystalline Xerians projected holographic questions directly into the air. My grandfather, meanwhile, sat peacefully on the back porch with Kithara, sharing morning tea as if the universe hadn't collectively gasped. The bonding of memory begins at sunset, Kithara was explaining, her skin a serene pale blue. It's the first of 3 sacred rituals before our union can be blessed. I slumped into a chair beside them, my tablet buzzing with emergency messages from the Terran embassy. The entire diplomatic corps is in chaos. Ambassador Rodriguez called 6 times. There's talk of this affecting the trade agreements with the Faltheran sovereignty. Victor's weathered hand found mine. Elena, in all my years commanding starships, I learned that sometimes the most important decisions are the ones that terrify bureaucrats. Kithara tilted her head with that bird-like grace her species possessed. Your government fears our union? They fear what they don't understand, I said, scrolling through increasingly frantic messages. Half the galaxy thinks this is a publicity stunt. The other half thinks it's either beautiful or horrifying, depending on their species' customs. Show me, Victor said quietly. I pulled up the holographic news feeds. The Andromedan Broadcasting Network was calling it the marriage that bridges eternity. The Centauri News Collective labeled it interspecies desperation. Most disturbing were the human feeds, everything from alien gold digger targets war hero to love transcends age and species. Kithara's skin flushed deep purple with anger. They understand nothing. This is not about material gain or physical desire. Explain it to me, Victor said gently. Help me understand what tonight means to your people. Her coloring softened to warm amber as she spoke. The bonding of memory is when time-touched ones share their accumulated wisdom with their chosen partner. Through neural linking, I will experience your memories, your pain, your triumphs, and you will see my world through my eyes. Understand why your experiences are sacred to us. I felt a chill. Neural linking? Is that safe for humans? Perfectly safe, Kithara assured me. Though intimate beyond what your species typically experiences, I will know Victor as no one ever has. His thoughts, his dreams, his regrets, she paused, skin shifting to deeper gold. And he will understand the depth of honor he represents to my people. Victor stood and walked to the garden's edge, looking out at the city skyline. Kithara, I need you to understand something. I'm not the hero the galaxy thinks I am. I've made mistakes, lost good people under my command. My memories aren't all noble. She joined him, and I watched something pass between them, a look of understanding that made my breath catch. Victor, among my people, wisdom comes from struggle, not perfection. Your failures make your successes more precious. Your losses give weight to what you've preserved. He turned to face her fully. And if, after seeing everything I am, you find me unworthy of this honor? Kithara's skin rippled through a spectrum I'd never seen before, deep purples mixing with brilliant golds and soft blues. Then I will have been blessed to witness the full tapestry of a life well lived, and I will still count myself honored. That afternoon, while they prepared for the ritual, I found myself answering calls from reporters, diplomats, and increasingly other human families with alien friends. Mrs. Chen from downtown called to ask if her Rigelian neighbor's courtship gifts were appropriate. Dr. Patel wanted to know if his Delton research partner's dinner invitations were romantic or cultural. Elena, my grandfather called from his study as evening approached. He emerged wearing his formal naval dress uniform, every medal and ribbon precisely placed. Despite his age, he still cut an impressive figure. You look, I started. Nervous, he supplied with a wry smile. Ready, I finished. You look ready for whatever comes next. Cathara appeared in the doorway, now dressed in flowing robes that seemed to capture and reflect starlight. Her skin glowed with anticipation, cycling through gentle waves of silver and gold. "It's time," she said simply. As we walked to the prepared chamber, our living room transformed by Valtharan ceremonial objects, I realized I was about to witness something unprecedented in human history. Not just an interspecies marriage, but a joining of minds and souls that might change how both our species understood connection itself. The sunset painted the sky in impossible colors as Victor and Cathara took their positions on either side of the neural linking apparatus. The last light of day caught in Cathara's eyes as she looked at my grandfather with something that was definitely more than political calculation. "Are you certain?" he asked one final time. "I have never been more certain of anything," she replied, her skin now blazing with brilliant gold. As they reached for each other's hands across the linking field, I understood that whatever happened next would change all of us forever. The neural linking chamber hummed with an otherworldly harmony as twilight deepened outside. I sat in the corner, officially present as family witness, though I felt more like an intruder preparing to observe the most intimate moment possible between two conscious beings. Cathara and my grandfather sat facing each other in chairs designed to accommodate both human and Valtharan physiology. Between them, a crystalline device no larger than a dinner plate projected a soft field of swirling energy. The Valtharan ceremonial objects around the room, carved stones that sang with harmonic frequencies, bioluminescent plants that responded to emotion, and hanging crystals that captured and reflected memory, created an atmosphere that felt ancient and sacred. "The linking will begin gently," Cathara explained, her skin now cycling through deep purples and silver. "First, surface thoughts and recent memories. Then, as trust builds, deeper experiences. Victor, you may guide me to specific memories, or allow the connection to flow naturally." My grandfather nodded, his expression calm but alert. "I've lived a long time, Cathara. Some of what you'll see won't be pleasant. Nor will some of mine," she replied softly. "My people have not always been as peaceful as we appear to outsiders." They placed their hands on opposite sides of the crystalline device. Immediately, the air between them shimmered, and both their faces took on expressions of wonder and mild shock. "Oh," Cathara breathed, her skin flashing bright gold. "Your mind is vast. So many experiences layered upon each other." Victor's eyes widened. "Your thoughts. They're like music. I can hear how you think, not just what you think." For the first hour, I watched their faces reflect the ebb and flow of shared consciousness. Sometimes Victor would smile at some memory Cathara was experiencing. Other times her skin would shift to deep blues of sadness or gentle greens of comfort as she witnessed his losses. "The Battle of Kepler Station," Victor said aloud, though I suspected he was speaking more to the memory than to us. "You're seeing my greatest failure." Cathara's entire body shimmered with empathetic purple. "You saved 73 lives that day. The 17 you lost, you carry their names in your heart like sacred songs." "Sacred songs," he repeated wonderingly. "Is that how you see it?" "I see a commander who chose to sacrifice tactical advantage to preserve life, who stayed behind to ensure others could escape. Your culture calls this heroism. Mine calls it Thelmore, the wisdom of the heart." As the night deepened, their connection grew more profound. I watched my grandfather's face cycle through expressions I'd never seen. Sometimes peaceful, sometimes awed, occasionally troubled. Cathara's skin told its own story, flowing through colors that spoke of discovery, admiration, and something approaching reverence. "Your grandmother," Cathara whispered, tears, actual tears, which I'd never seen from a Valtharan, sliding down her luminous cheeks. "She was magnificent. The way you loved her." Victor's own eyes grew wet. "Margaret, yes, you're seeing our wedding day. How we met. Her last words to me. She told you to keep exploring, to keep discovering wonder in the universe. She knew you would need purpose after she was gone. And through your memories I see your first bonding, Victor said softly. Thelkas was your intended before the plague took him. Kethara's skin rippled with deep purples and blacks, colors I recognized as profound grief. You understand why this union means so much to me. Not just the honor of bonding with a Thelnaris, but the chance to experience love again, even if differently. Something shifted in the room's atmosphere. The harmonic frequencies grew richer, the bioluminescent plants brighter. I realized I was witnessing the moment when political arrangement began transforming into something deeper. Victor, Kethara said, her voice filled with wonder. Your memories of first contact with alien species when you weren't afraid. You were curious, excited. You saw opportunity where others saw threat. And you, he replied, leaning forward slightly, chose diplomacy as your path because you believe different perspectives make us stronger. Your advocacy for the cultural exchange program came from genuine desire to understand other species. Their hands moved closer together on the crystalline surface, and the energy field between them intensified. Both their faces now showed expressions of deep concentration mixed with growing affection. I'm seeing your childhood, Victor said with gentle humor. You were quite the troublemaker. Kethara's skin flickered with embarrassed golds. I may have convinced several clutchmates to attempt flying before our wings developed properly. Sounds familiar. Elena's mother was equally adventurous at that age. They shared what could only be described as an intimate laugh, and I felt something tighten in my chest, not jealousy but recognition. This wasn't just ceremony anymore. Whatever was happening between them was real, spontaneous, and beautiful. The linking is nearly complete, Kethara announced, though she seemed reluctant to break the connection. Victor, I must ask formally, having seen my true nature, my motivations, my past, do you accept this bonding? My grandfather was quiet for a long moment, his weathered face peaceful in the crystalline glow. Kethara of the Valtheran sovereignty, I accept you as my partner in this union. Not just for the honor you offer, but for the remarkable being you are. Her skin blazed with brilliant gold and silver, more radiant than I'd ever seen any Valtheran. Then we are truly bonded in mind and spirit. The ceremony in 3 days will be mere formality. As they slowly withdrew their hands and the energy field faded, I realized I had witnessed something unprecedented. The birth of a love that transcended species, age, and cultural boundaries. My grandfather and Kethara sat looking at each other, with expressions of wonder, affection, and deep recognition. They had found something neither had expected, a true companion for whatever time remained. The wedding ceremony took place in the grand pavilion of the Terran Embassy, beneath a specially constructed transparent dome that allowed both Earth's moon and the artificial lunar station to shine down upon the proceedings. Representatives from 43 different species filled the vast space, their various forms creating a spectacular tapestry of galactic diversity. I stood at my grandfather's side as his primary family witness, wearing formal human ceremonial dress while Kethara's cousin Velthar served as her bonding advocate. The Valtheran delegation wore robes that seemed to capture and refract light, making them appear as living prisms against the star-filled backdrop. Nervous, I whispered to Victor as the processional music, a haunting blend of human strings and Valtheran harmonic crystals, began to play. My grandfather, resplendent in his admiral's dress uniform with every honor and decoration perfectly placed, smiled with genuine contentment. At my age, Elena, nervousness is a luxury I can't afford. Besides, he glanced toward where Kethara waited at the altar, her skin glowing with anticipation. After the bonding of memory, there are no secrets left between us. The ceremony began with traditional Valtheran chants that spoke of time, wisdom, and the sacred nature of accumulated experience. Ambassador Rodriguez, despite his initial diplomatic panic, had thrown himself into making this the wedding of the century, and the result was breathtaking. Holographic displays showed significant moments from both cultures' marriage traditions, while aromatic flowers from 6 different worlds filled the air with complex, beautiful scents. When Kethara began her approach down the aisle, the entire assembly fell silent. She moved with that characteristic Valthyran grace, but her skin told a story of deep emotion. Waves of gold and silver intermixed with soft blues of joy and deeper purples of reverence. Her wedding robe seemed to float around her, inscribed with bioluminescent patterns that told the story of her lineage. But it was her eyes that caught my breath, fixed on my grandfather with an expression of such profound affection and respect that it transformed her already striking features into something luminous. This wasn't duty or political calculation. This was a being walking towards someone she genuinely cherished. Victor's own transformation was equally remarkable. As Cathara approached, years seemed to fall away from his weathered features. He stood straighter, his eyes bright with an alertness and joy I hadn't seen since before my grandmother's death. When Cathara reached the altar and took his offered arm, he spoke quietly enough that only those nearby could hear. "You are radiant, my dear." Her skin flashed brilliant gold, and she replied in heavily accented English, "As are you, my beloved Thelnaris." The ceremony itself was a masterful blend of traditions. They exchanged human wedding rings, simple bands of earth gold that Victor had commissioned with subtle Valthyran design elements. But they also performed the Valthyran ritual of shared breath, where both partners breathed from a crystal vessel, filled with atmosphere from their respective homeworlds, symbolizing the joining of their very life forces. "Do you, Victor Reeves, accept Cathara as your partner in wisdom, your companion in exploration, your equal in honor?" Ambassador Rodriguez read from the specially prepared ceremony text. "I do," Victor replied, his voice carrying the authority that had once commanded fleets but now held deep tenderness. "In this life and whatever comes after." Cathara's vows were spoken in her native tongue, her skin cycling through every color, in her emotional spectrum as she spoke. Belthar translated, "She pledges to honor his wisdom, to preserve his legacy, to walk beside him as long as the stars shine, and to carry his memory forward through all her remaining years." When they kissed, a gesture Cathara had learned was important to human ceremony, the assembled crowd erupted in celebration. 43 different species expressing joy created a cacophony that was somehow harmonious, a testament to the unity this unlikely marriage had inspired. The reception that followed was equally spectacular. I watched my grandfather and his new wife move through the crowd, accepting congratulations from beings whose physiology ranged from crystalline to gaseous. Victor spoke with each guest personally, his diplomatic experience serving him well, while Cathara's skin provided a constant, light show of pleasure and contentment. But it was the quiet moments I treasured most. When they thought no one was watching, I saw Victor gently adjust Cathara's robes when they caught on her chair. I saw her place a protective hand on his arm when a particularly enthusiastic Centauri delegate became too animated in conversation. I saw them share glances across the room that spoke of inside jokes and shared understanding. During the traditional first dance, adapted for Valthyran physiology, they moved together with surprising grace. Victor, despite his age, still possessed the fluid movement of a career spacer, while Cathara seemed to float beside him. "They look happy," Dr. Martinez from the Xenobiology department commented as she joined me at the observation deck. "They look complete," I corrected, watching as my grandfather whispered something that made Cathara's skin shimmer with delighted laughter, like they found something neither of them expected to find again. As the evening progressed and guests began to depart, I found myself alone with the newlyweds on the pavilion's terrace. Earth's moon hung full and bright above us while the space station's artificial glow provided a secondary light source, a perfect metaphor for the joining of natural and created, traditional and innovative. "Elena," Cathara said, her skin now cycling through contented blues and greens, "thank you for accepting me into your family." "Thank you for making him happy," I replied honestly. "I haven't seen him this alive in years." Victor took both our hands in his. "My dear granddaughter, what we've done here goes beyond personal happiness. We've proven that connection, real connection, can transcend every boundary the universe puts in our path." Looking at them together, my elderly grandfather and his luminous alien bride, I realized he was right. They had created something unprecedented, something that would change how both species understood love, honor, and the possibilities that existed when worlds chose to bridge their differences rather than emphasize them. The galaxy would never be quite the same. 6 months after the wedding that had captivated 43 star systems, I found myself standing in the doorway of what had once been my grandfather's austere study, now transformed into something that belonged in a fairy tale. Valthyran memory. Crystals hung alongside human naval medals, bioluminescent plants from Kethera's homeworld intertwined with earth roses, and 2 reading chairs positioned perfectly to catch both the morning sun and the gentle glow of crystalline mood enhancers. "Elena, perfect timing," my grandfather called from his desk where he was reviewing what appeared to be diplomatic correspondence. At 1:20, he looked better than he had in years, his posture straighter, his eyes brighter, his movements carrying an energy that seemed to radiate from within. Kethera emerged from their bedroom, her skin cycling through the warm golds and soft blues I'd learned indicated domestic contentment. She wore a flowing gown that managed to look both elegant and comfortable, perfectly suited for a quiet morning, at home. Her movements had adapted to human rhythms while retaining that characteristic Valthyran grace. "Good morning, Elena," she said, approaching to embrace me in the gesture she'd adopted from human customs. "Victor was just reading me the latest requests for diplomatic consultation. It seems our union has inspired several other interspecies couples to seek formal recognition." I settled into the chair they'd designated as mine during these weekly visits. "How many now?" 17 official requests, Victor replied, his voice carrying satisfaction, including a rather touching letter from a Rigelian engineer and her human architect partner. They've been together for 3 years but never considered marriage, until our ceremony showed them it was possible. Kethera moved to stand behind his chair, her hands resting gently on his shoulders, a gesture of affection that had become natural to both of them. "The Galactic Council has asked us to serve on a new committee for interspecies family law. Apparently, we've created a precedent that requires new legal frameworks. Are you interested?" I asked, though I could see the answer in their shared look of excitement. "We're considering it," Victor said, "though I suspect I'd be more effective as a consultant than a full committee member. Age has its wisdom, but also its limitations." "Nonsense," Kethera interjected, her skin flashing with mock indignation. "You have more energy now than when we first met. The bonding of memory seems to have revitalized you as much as it elevated me." She wasn't wrong. The change in my grandfather had been remarkable. The quiet melancholy that had shadowed him since my grandmother's death had lifted, replaced by curiosity, purpose, and genuine joy. His twice-weekly communications with the Valthyran sovereignty had evolved into a formal cultural exchange program. His memoir, Bridging the Stars: A Life Between Worlds, had become a bestseller across 7 species. "Speaking of energy," Victor said with a mischievous glint in his eye, "show Elena the morning room." Kethera's skin rippled with what I recognized as pleased embarrassment. "Victor, she'll think we're being ridiculous." "What morning room?" I asked, following them down the hallway to what had once been a spare bedroom. They opened the door to reveal a space that took my breath away. The room had been transformed into a meditation and exercise chamber with equipment designed for both human and Valthyran physiology. But what caught my attention were the walls, covered with star charts, photographs, and what appeared to be travel itineraries. "We're planning a honeymoon," Kethera explained, her skin cycling through excited golds and adventurous oranges. "A grand tour of systems we've both always wanted to explore together." I stared at them. "You're going to travel? At your age?" Victor laughed, the sound rich and delighted. "Elena, I've spent the last 5 years acting like I was already dead. Kethera has reminded me that life is for living, regardless of how much time remains. The Andromeda Cultural Exchange has invited us to visit their floating cities," Kethera added, her enthusiasm infectious. "And the Centauri Council wants Victor to address their naval academy about interspecies cooperation. Plus," Victor said, moving to examine a holographic star map. There are 17 systems I charted but never had time to explore properly. Cathara has expressed interest in seeing them through the eyes of their discoverer. As I watched them plan their adventures with the excitement of newlyweds half their combined age, I realized something profound had occurred. This marriage, which had begun as cultural honor and political alliance, had become something neither species had anticipated. A genuine partnership that enhanced both individuals. "There's something else," Cathara said, her skin shifting to deeper, more serious purples. "The Valthiran sovereignty has officially recognized human elders as potential Thelnaris candidates. Your species' experience with exploration, innovation, and adaptation has impressed our Council of Matriarchs." "What does that mean practically?" "It means," Victor explained, "that other Valtarians may seek bondings with aged humans. But more importantly, it means both our species are learning to see wisdom and value in forms we never considered before." That afternoon, as I prepared to leave, I found them in their garden, working together to create a hybrid growing space that could support both Earth and Valthiran plants. Victor, despite his age, knelt beside Cathara as they carefully transplanted seedlings that glowed with soft bioluminescence. "Elena," Cathara called without looking up from her work, "I hope you know that loving your grandfather has taught me things about your species that no diplomatic briefing ever could, such as that humans don't just adapt to survive. You transform everything you touch, making it better. Victor has shown me that growth and change aren't just for the young. And you," she looked up at me with those luminous silver eyes, "have shown me that family isn't just about blood or species, but about choosing to care for each other across any difference." As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the ripple effects of their unlikely union. The galaxy had watched a 120-year-old human admiral marry an alien diplomat and seen not just romance but possibility. Interspecies adoption agencies were reporting increased inquiries. Cross-cultural research partnerships were flourishing. The University of New Geneva had established the Reeves-Cathara Institute for Xenocultural Studies. But perhaps most importantly, I had learned something about love itself. It wasn't bound by age, species, or conventional expectations. It was about recognition, respect, and the choice to grow together rather than apart. My grandfather and Cathara had found something that transcended every boundary the universe had placed between them, and in doing so, they had shown all of us that connection was possible across any divide. 6 months ago, an alien had proposed to my grandfather, and I had thought the universe had gone mad. Now I understood that sometimes madness and profound wisdom looked remarkably similar, and sometimes the most unexpected unions created the most extraordinary possibilities. As Earth's moon rose over the city, I smiled, thinking of the adventures still ahead for the galaxy's most unlikely couple, and the new definitions of love they were writing among the stars.